So for a bit of context, that's Bosnia in red down there, and that's the UK. My family came to England in July 1994 as refugees. We left everyone and everything behind. As you'll see throughout my talk, it was one of many occasions where we had to make a quick decision, not fully knowing what impact those decisions would have on us, but we had to simply make them to survive. I was born in a little town called Stolac in southern Bosnia. It's a beautiful part of the country with a lot of incredible architecture, natural landscapes, and Bosnia was very much a normal, modern European country, and we had everything that we had here: cinemas, theatre, museums, libraries. A year before I was born, Bosnia hosted the Winter Olympics in 1984. And some of you watching this might remember Torvill and Dean becoming the highest scoring figure skaters of all time. In 1991, my parents were in their 30s, about my age now. We had just moved into a new home that they had designed and built, and childhood was just amazing. In Bosnia, we weren't raised to differentiate between Muslims or Christians or to identify people along ethnic or religious lines. I'm the one being held there by one of my cousins. I'm the one with blonde hair, just there. In my family, we still have Muslims, we have Christians and atheists, of course. The only difference between us kids was which cartoon we liked, which books we liked to read, which football club we supported. I just knew at certain times of the year we would visit our friends on Christmas and buy presents for each other, and then they would do the same for us in Eid. Then came a time when things appeared as if they changed quickly, and when none of that mattered anymore. Bosnia became the scene of the biggest atrocities on European soldiers 50 years on from the Holocaust. In 3.5 years of destruction, more than 100,000 people were killed. More than 2 million people displaced or became refugees, and between 20 and 80,000 young girls and women were raped. There are still more than 7,000 missing persons in Bosnia today. And it wasn't just people that were targeted. Proof of this existence, proof of a shared and multicultural Bosnia was targeted. So museums, archives, libraries, books. More than 2 million books and journals were destroyed in the National Library alone. Although this seemed like it happened overnight, it wasn't the case. This is what happens when a whole group of people is persuaded into thinking that another group of people didn't belong anymore. In a very similar way to how many Germans were persuaded that Jewish people and other groups didn't belong in Germany anymore during the Second World War. You expect genocide, mass murder and rape to be perpetrated by strangers and by monsters. You don't expect normal people to be able to do these things. You imagine unknown soldiers coming into town, maybe speaking a foreign language, wearing a uniform covered in familiar symbols and flags of foreign countries. It's easier to imagine that than to imagine your next door neighbour, your friend, your classmate, your teacher, suddenly wanting to kill you just because of who you happen to be. But that is exactly what happened in Bosnia. Neighbour turned on neighbour, friend turned on friend, and even in some cases family turned on family just because of our faith. Majority of these perpetrators before the war were good, honest, ordinary people, but somehow they accepted this ideology that othered a whole group of people. In reality, genocide doesn't happen overnight. For about 10 years leading up to the war, there was a steady rise in casual racism, hate crime. Nationalist parties started coming to power. In 1986, just 2 years on from the Olympics, Slobodan Milosevic, a Serbian politician, came to power, and by 1991, politicians were openly equating Bosnian Muslims to disease and vermin and so on. And again, very similar to what we saw during the Holocaust. So there comes a point where ridding Muslims, the disease, the idea of killing another human being, it not only becomes morally acceptable, it becomes a moral imperative. to kill and torture all day, because what are you doing when you are ridding disease out of society? You're doing a society a service. Genocide is never an individual act because it involves and requires the support of the entire society. And I don't mean we should hold everybody equally responsible. I mean it includes and requires the support of all elements of society. So from the media, religious community, academics, politicians, and of course, all of us. In 1991, I was 6 years old. My parents, as I said, had just moved into a new home that they had spent a lot of time building and working on. My dad worked in a local factory. My mum looked after me, my brother and sister. I'm the one on the right there with the red and white shorts. And that's my cousin in the middle and my brother far left. So I was old enough to see things changing around me, but I didn't fully understand what was happening. At that age, you're too busy playing and being a child. But I still picked up bits that my parents and the other adults were discussing around me. I knew something was happening. One day I remember running into the house and seeing my mum in front of the TV crying. She tried to hide her tears, but I could see she was upset. As a child, you just sense the emotions on your parents' face. I remember she hugged me. She kissed me like she always did and said it was nothing, go outside and play. And again, being a child, you listen to your parents, easily distracted. I went outside and played. And it was only years later that I realized that my mum was watching TV and she was watching war spreading across Bosnia. And she knew it was getting closer to us, but she was completely helpless. There was nothing to do. There was nothing she could do to help us. And that, as a parent, I can imagine must have been the worst feeling. Gradually, we started hearing explosions and shooting in the distance. It was getting closer and closer to us until one day, it was spring 1992. Our town was surrounded by the Yugoslav National Army, or the Serbian army. And at first, soldiers were coming over for coffee and tea. These were friends. These were people that my parents knew and grew up with. But then things quickly changed. We started hearing rumours of concentration camps and torture and rape and killings. And one day, a soldier, a friend that had been over literally every single day for tea and coffee, he came over and I ran up to him like I did every single day, and he just pushed me away. And he was ranting about Muslims doing something somewhere. I just remember thinking, what has this got to do with me? I haven't done anything. He got his knife out and he started sharpening it. And he said today was a good day for cutting throats. We were lucky that another Serbian friend, a soldier, was nearby and he came and saved us. We had a lot of incredible friends that risked their own lives at this time to bring us food and medicine and helped us on occasions like this. But I wonder how many people would have the courage now to risk their own lives to help their friends in this way. First few months of war were probably the most difficult. The shock, the realization that it's actually happening. Before the war, the concept of war, bombs and people being killed and starving, people fleeing their homes as refugees, I think for many of us, it still is something that we just see on TV, in films, on the news, or read about in history books. It's something that happens somewhere else to someone else. And I don't think anyone truly believes that it can ever really happen to them. But I think that is the biggest delusion, thinking that somehow we are different and that it can't happen to us. And imagine all the things that we take for granted now that were gone overnight. Not being able to sleep at night because of constant gunfire and explosions and screams and cries. The shock of not having food, water, electricity, all of those things were gone. In the first 9 months of war, we had to flee more than 14 times, each time not really knowing where we were going or what we would find. But it was a simple decision. We stay and be killed, or we move. We became the people that we saw on TV, the people that we thought were so different from us. My dad and my uncles and my cousins joined the army, they became soldiers. And I said my dad worked in a factory before the war. He certainly wasn't a soldier, but they joined the local army to fight alongside their Croatian friends and neighbours to fight against the Serbs that were occupying Bosnia at the time. We, kids tried to get on with our lives the best we could. We tried hardest to preserve normality, friendships. Old games are replaced by games of war with shooting and tanks and grenades. Maybe some of you watching this collect objects or books or football tops. Well, me and my brother started collecting bullets and pieces of shrapnel. That was our childhood. But again, things started changing. So about a year into the war, Muslims again, or Bosnian Muslims, started becoming the scapegoat. So all Muslims were to be photographed and recorded. This is me far left, my sister in the middle, and my brother far right. Few days later after this, I was playing with my friends and we saw trucks leaving town. And we ran to the road excited, really not understanding what was happening. And one of my friends spotted his uncles and we're all waving excitedly. My sister spotted my dad and we're waving so excited. We've run home to tell our mum what we had seen. And just by her reaction, we knew wasn't something good. Later on, we find out that all of the men were captured and taken away somewhere, and we didn't really know where. So on the 1st of July 1993, Croatians started gathering all Bosnian Muslim men. The oldest was 90 and the youngest was just 13, so not all of fighting age. Local schools and hospitals and factories were set up as places of torture and rape and concentration camps, and they were just gone. And we didn't know, as I said, where they were taken, whether they were dead or alive. We were staying with my uncle at the time, and the next day they came to take him. And I still remember my sister screaming at the top of her lungs, "You've taken my dad, please don't take my uncle." And she just kept repeating it over and over again. And we were holding on to him, but they took him away. So most of my male relatives were gone, only women and children behind. Two of my cousins were just 16. Another cousin was 17, and he was taken to a local hospital, which was set up as a torture chamber, where he went through some of the most awful things, and the beatings and awful things. And this was done to him by his neighbors, his parents' friends. Women and children remained behind for more than a month. As I said, we thought they were all killed. We heard awful rumors. We had Croatian soldiers come to our house every single day, threatening to kill and rape everybody. One day, a man came with a huge sword, like a massive samurai sword, saying he was going to chop all of our heads off. Our friends and neighbors forgot us overnight. The only sympathy that we got in that month was from animals. Just before the war started, when we had moved into our new home, my parents bought us a dog. We named him Lessie. He was a German Shepherd. And he was very protective of us. So when he would start howling, we knew we had to run. He could always just sense shelling would start or something bad would happen. So it was great having him around, especially when my dad was taken away. By August of 1993, so a month after my dad was taken away, Leslie wasn't eating at all. He was just burying all of his food that we were giving him. We knew something was happening. My mum packed our bags, and Leslie was right. On the 4th of August 1993, Croatian soldiers came and forced all of us out of our homes and forced us to march to a local factory where my dad had just worked just before the war. And we had to make a quick decision about what to do with Leslie. He was part of our family, and we were begging my mum to take him with us, but really we knew that by this point German Shepherds are big dogs, and we knew at this point that, that being so protective of us that he could attack someone. And we begged my mum, and she thought she was doing the best thing, so she tied him behind the house, away from the house. She left food for him, thinking no one would hurt a dog. Why would anyone hurt an animal? And as we were walking away, we saw those houses already being looted. We saw houses on fire, and we heard 2 gunshots. And our neighbours had shot Leslie trying to get into our home. As I said, some houses were already on fire, as were libraries, museums. The local mosque, which was about 500 years old, was blown up, and even the foundations dug up. Local hospitals and factories, as I said, were set up as places of torture. So by the time we arrived at the factory, which I knew well because that's where my dad had worked, there was hundreds of people there already, and people crying and panicking. And I remember my mom holding on to me so hard. I remember my hand actually hurting because she was so worried about losing us in the crowd. We saw some young girls and women being singled out, and we were all taken in to one of the office buildings, and each family was searched, and my mom was forced to sign this document to say that she was given everything up for safekeeping. So just a few months ago, while doing research at Newcastle University, I actually found that very document, and my mom is number 13 on the list, and you can see that's her signature there. And it says my mom signed over 2 pairs of earrings and a wedding ring for safekeeping. And when I showed this to my mom, she broke down in tears because it was a physical proof of our experience. This document is priceless for me as a researcher and for my family, but documents like this don't tell us the reality of what happened that day. We're so used to seeing news reports, statistics and numbers, dramatic footage about war, about refugees and migrants and asylum seekers, but sometimes we forget that behind every statistic, behind every label, behind every document, there is a human being and there is a human experience. This document doesn't tell us that those items were not handed over for safekeeping, but they were taken from us, and they've never been returned. The ring and the earrings were not the only items taken. It doesn't tell us how the whole ordeal lasted more than 45 minutes of us being searched. It doesn't tell us that the earrings were taken from my little sister and they had been given to her by my granddad just before he passed away. It doesn't tell us how my sister begged and cried, but they took those earrings anyway. It doesn't tell us how I was bribed with chocolate. One of the soldiers kept saying, if you tell me where your mom is hiding the money, I'll buy you a massive chocolate bar. And I remember looking up, and I could see a reflection of myself crying in his sunglasses. It doesn't tell us how my mom knew one of the soldiers, and she knew that he had a family of his own, and she explained to him that we had been refugees, and he knew all this already for over a year. It doesn't tell us anything about how then one of the soldiers started searching my mom and grabbing her. It doesn't tell us how scared I was and how scared we all were, and that when we started crying, they just saw that as a sign that we had something to hide. These soldiers didn't see a friend anymore. They didn't see a mother with kids. They didn't see the humanity on us. We were reduced to a statistic, to a piece of gold, to a signature. And that is exactly what the humanization leads to. We were loaded onto cattle trucks. We didn't know where we were going, and we thought we would all be killed again. We waited on the trucks for about an hour before we started moving, and Bosnia in August is incredibly hot. Literally people on top of each other. You have 3 jumpers on, 2 jackets, because we weren't allowed to carry many things. There was a little baby crying, and the baby fainted, and the mother seen this, the mother fainted. We had 1 bottle of water, and my mom used it to wash their faces. And because it was so incredibly hot, I fainted as well, and I just remember kind of hazily remembering the rest of the journey. After a long journey on these cattle trucks, we were dropped off near Bosnian government-controlled territory and forced to march the rest of the way. We didn't really know where we were going or what we would find. We were completely cut off by this point. As we marched, there was hundreds of people panicking, crying, belongings scattered across the road. There was elderly unable to walk anymore, sitting by the road, literally just crying. At one point, I stepped over something and I thought it was a pile of clothes and a foam mattress. But as I stepped over it, I felt something different. I felt something hard underneath my feet. And as the foam mattress kind of slipped off, I saw it was the body of an old man. And in that moment, I just remember thinking about my granddad, because I knew that he was somewhere here in this crowd. And I just kept thinking, has he managed to keep walking? Has he managed to get through this? After moving for several weeks and living in ruins at times, we eventually settled in a town called Mostar. And Mostar was famous for its old bridge that I had as my screensaver right at the start. And Mostar was surrounded by the Serbian army on one side and the Croatian army on the other side. And you had this high concentration of people stuck in the middle, shelled and bombed daily, without food and water and electricity. And if they're not killed by all of this, then they'll die of starvation and disease. And the bridge and that whole area, I think more than 80% of the city centre was completely destroyed. And I've got a quick video which I will try and play now, just to show you a bit of the scale of the destruction. And you can see the kind of living conditions we had at the time. And this is the area around the old bridge that I showed you at the start. So you can see everything is completely destroyed. And just on the left here, that's where the bridge is. Life was incredibly difficult, but we were lucky because we at least had my auntie there, my mom's sister, my auntie Amina, and we managed to find her, and we were staying there with my uncle, her two kids, and my grandparents who had come just a few days before us. And she was always my favorite auntie. She always had a smile on her face. She was always joking around. She had this beautiful long wavy hair. And she was 38, so just 3 years older than me now. So it was at least a bit of security and a bit of normality being there with her. And although we were living in such conditions, her and my mum they were always so creative with how they managed to keep us going. Some days we would eat once, most days we wouldn't eat anything. We fell asleep hungry every single night. But we were alive. That was the most important thing. But as I said, they were so creative and always managed to put food on the table for us. So they used chicken feed to make bread. They used grass to make pies. And the chicken feed was mixed with some other white chemical powder. And we weren't sure what it was, but we needed it to make bread. But eventually we stopped using it because whatever that powder was, our skin started peeling off. So I remember my brother taking off his jeans one day and literally the skin of his legs just completely fell off. But our kids, apart from the boredom, somehow we got on. We didn't ask for food because we knew we didn't have any. In November 1993, we heard that my dad was alive. We heard that he was in a concentration camp, and we heard that 500 inmates in the worst condition, where so those that were beaten and tortured, would be released to an island off Croatia. So we find out that my dad was taken to a camp called Dretelj. It was a camp run by the Croatian army. And my dad lost 26 kilograms in the first few weeks, so that's about 4 stone. And he went through the most inhumane torture and beating on a daily basis. So very little food, no medical help or treatment, and not everyone there was healthy or there was kids there as well. My dad was then brought to the UK by the British Red Cross in collaboration with the British government. He was promised if he left and if he didn't go back to Bosnia, that we would be joining him immediately. When that didn't happen, my dad actually requested, and this is the letter that he wrote, he actually requested to be sent back to Bosnia, because back in Mostar, things were still difficult. We started night school as a way of resisting. as an act of defiance, because we were desperately trying to hold on to our values, our culture, our identity, and we loved school because that was the only bit of normality that we have. And around this time, we started receiving letters from my dad, actually, through the Red Cross. And I was so desperate to read and write because I had missed so much schooling already. And this bit at the bottom here, and I've still got this letter, that was the first time that my dad had actually seen my handwriting. So in January 1994, shelling was more frequent and intense than ever before. Thousands and thousands of shells were falling on Mostar daily. And for whatever reason, our house, my auntie's house, was being targeted even more. So we could see a Croatian tank come out and target the city. And we had nowhere to hide. We would just go to the back room and all hold on to each other and pray that one of the shells wouldn't come through. On one occasion, our house was hit by 6 tank shells, and literally the whole house shaking, and you feel like it's going to collapse any minute. My last night of school was on the 23rd of January 1994, and that night Croatians used a plane to drop bombs onto Mostar. Through my classroom window, I could see our street, our neighbourhood up in flames. There was so much panic and screaming, but I was just frozen in shock. I don't remember crying or screaming at all. I just kept looking up at our house. Back at my house, or back at my auntie's house, my auntie Amina was wounded. My grandparents, my 2 cousins, my auntie's 2 sons, and my sister carried her out of the house on a blanket. Neighbours rushed out to help. They managed to get her into a car, but petrol was almost impossible to come by. They pushed and pushed and managed to get to the main road, where they managed to get her into another car. And this is all while being, bombed and shelled, and it's pitch black. And the car drove frantically in the dark, and that car ran out of petrol as well. And they had to push, and they pushed, and they managed to get her to a hospital. It was a makeshift hospital. It didn't have any modern equipment or medicine, but at least they had doctors. And one of my mom's first cousin actually was a doctor there, and he was one of the doctors that was treating her. And they tried very hard to save her life, but she had lost so much blood, and unfortunately the next morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, she passed away. The easiest thing for my mom, the more soothing thing to do in that moment, she's just lost her sister. Her kids are starving. She hasn't seen her husband or brother and most of her other male relatives for months. The easiest and the most soothing thing in that moment would have been to tell us to direct our anger at all Croatians and to say that all Croats and all Croatians are exactly the same. They're all responsible. But she realised what impact this could have on us. She sat me, my brother and sister down on the very day that she lost her sister and carefully explained that we can't live our life in anger and hate. She explained that there are good and bad people out there, and the best way to resist those that were trying to kill us and that were killing us was not to become hateful and angry like them. A few months later, on the 19th of June 1994, the British Red Cross came to take us to England. We had less than 2 hours to get ready, and my mum had to make a quick decision. We wanted to be with my dad, of course, but it meant leaving everyone and everything behind again, leaving my grandparents who were so reliant on my mum. The journey to Newcastle took more than a month. We spent a month in a refugee camp in Croatia, and that's me there with the blue shorts and these my brother and sister and some of our friends there. And coming to the UK was absolutely amazing. Seeing my dad for the first time in over a year. We had both changed so much. I had blonde hair before I left, and then I came to the UK and I've got hair like this. First night in England, I woke up screaming. I started having nightmares. My parents had an opportunity to leave Bosnia early on in the war, but they decided to stay because no one really wants to leave their home. So my dad came to the UK on the 19th of January 1994. We left Bosnia on the 19th of June 1994, and we arrived in Newcastle on the 19th of July 1994. So the number 19 is our lucky number. So I was 9 years old at the time, and I started school in year 5, not knowing a word of English. And my teacher was amazing, but I couldn't understand anything that she was saying, or anyone else for that matter. And she had this thing that at the end of each day, she would sit down, we would all sit around her, and she'd play the guitar, and we'd sing this song about having a great day at school with our friends and so on. She'd sing her part and then say someone's name, and they would become part of the song. So the next part of the song, you sing with that person's name, and they get to go home first. And everyone loved this part of the day, but I hated it. One day we sat down and everyone is encouraging me to sing, and I'm thinking, oh, not this again. And then she started playing the guitar, and they all started singing this song in Bosnian. So when I was out learning English separately, she went through all this effort to teach her class to remember this song and sing this song in Bosnian. And that was absolutely incredible. That was literally the first day I went home with a smile on my face. I felt I was home. For me, it was easier. I was younger. My sister was 15. And she worked hard. She went to college. After college, she started working with refugees and vulnerable people, and she still does this today. My brother was 11. He went on to study biomedical science at Newcastle University. He got a first. After that, he went on to study medicine. He graduated and now works as a doctor here in Newcastle. And I think our lives could have been very different had my mom dealt with her sister's death in a different way, or if we all didn't have these amazing teachers to help us at the time. And my parents have always valued what this country has provided for them, and they've always wanted us to make a positive contribution. And when we've had the support that we've had from the people in the Northeast, because if it wasn't for the amazing people of the Northeast, we wouldn't be here. I think our lives would have been very, very different. And that was my brother. He was in the local newspaper when he got his GCSEs. But as I said, if we didn't have the support that we had, our lives would have been very, very different. And these tiny, small acts of kindness can have the biggest impact on a people's life. And I always like to end my presentations by asking people what they think, or to think about what peace means. War is far easier to define, but I think peace can be something a lot more difficult. And for me, the little acts of kindness, like my teacher teaching her whole class to sing this song in Bosnian, for me, that is peace. That is peace building. So I've realized I've gone over my time now. So thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Hello, I'm Emily from Belmont Community School. What is the situation like in Bosnia now?
So Bosnia today has gone a long way to rebuild and recover from the war. So we've had more than 25 years of peace. But the situation, and Bosnia is a beautiful, beautiful country, and I'd recommend anyone, if they do get the opportunity, to go to visit. But there is still tension in parts of Bosnia because we haven't really had peace, in the sense that the vast majority of the perpetrators of war crimes are still walking freely in the same communities that they terrorized. So in my hometown, vast majority of the people that, rounded up my dad, that tortured and killed people, that did these awful things, are still living freely in those communities. And then furthermore, you have war criminals, and even war criminals that have been convicted by the international courts. They're being openly celebrated. There are monuments, there are public squares and streets named after them. But as I said, that's just in parts of Bosnia, and the situation can be very, very difficult. But it's still, it's a safe, modern European country, has a lot to offer, and there's a lot that we can learn from what happened in Bosnia, which is what my work focuses on. So as I said, if you do ever get the opportunity to visit, I strongly recommend it.
Hi, I'm Isaac Soka. I'm from Belmont Community School. I'd like to ask a question. Do you still have family in Bosnia? And if so, are they okay? And how are they?
Sadly, most of my family is scattered across the world. So we came to the UK. I've got family in Australia and America, Germany, Austria, literally everywhere. As I said in my talk, there was the war displaced more than 2 million people, and we came to the UK as part of an agreement between the British government and the Croatian governments. So for Croatia, it was very important that once my dad was released from the prison camp, that he didn't go back to Bosnia, because they then feared that he would become a soldier. So the international community signed this agreement, and the UK was part of that agreement. And my dad was taken out, so he could pretty much choose to go anywhere in the world apart from the Middle East and Africa and Bosnia. So my dad chose the UK, and he was told he would only be here for 2 years. And now we've been here, well, 26 years, and the UK is our home. So we do have family across the world, but also we do have a lot of family in Bosnia as well. And as I said, in many parts they're fine and they're safe, but also we do have family members that, as I said, are still living surrounded by the people that, you know, committed these awful things. And I, in the talk, mentioned my 17-year-old cousin who was tortured by his neighbours, and he has returned to that home, and his family has rebuilt that home, and they still live amongst those same neighbours that did those most awful things to him. So life can be incredibly difficult in Bosnia, but I always use Bosnians as an example, because it's not just my mother that made these great efforts and had this incredible courage to teach us not to hate, not to generalize. I would say that has happened across Bosnia, because once you lose that many family members, once you lose everything, you realize what hate and anger can do. So in that sense, Bosnia is really an example of what can be achieved in terms of peace building.
Hi, I'm Jessica from Belmont Community School. Since leaving Bosnia, what are you most proud of achieving?
What am I most proud of achieving? I think that's always a difficult question. And if I go back to the point where my auntie was killed, and for my mum and for my auntie and my grandparents, it was always very important for them to hold on to our values, to hold on to what mattered to us. And I always make the point, my mum in that moment did the most difficult thing, the most courageous thing, to reject hate, because it could have been so much easier for her, the more soothing thing to just tell us to direct our hate and anger at them. But she was strong enough to help us imagine a better future. And in that moment, as a 9-year-old, I'm not sure whether I saw any good in the world, because we were shelled and, you know, killed and starving. And really, it was my mom and my auntie and my grandparents that constantly reminded us of that. And my mom always imagined a future where we would go to university. So I went to Newcastle University and I studied architecture, and I work at Newcastle University now. So not really my achievement, but I'm proud of the steps that my family has taken, because that has had the biggest impact on my life and the work that I do, sharing my story and the educational work around Bosnia. Well, I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for my mum and other family members that took those steps to help us understand what was happening at that time.
Hi, I'm Manisha Pabba from Belmont Community School. Do you have any children, and if so, what are your hopes for their future?
I don't have children of my own. I've got nieces and nephews, and really that is my motivation. So my work started off as like a personal quest for justice, because, as I said, we haven't seen justice in Bosnia, but and I do it because I want to raise awareness of what happened in Bosnia. But really, you know, I do it, or the main reason I do it, is because England's my home now. The Northeast is my home. I'm proud to be part of this region, to be part of this society. So I feel actually there is so much that we can learn from what happened in Bosnia, and that motivates me. And when I see my little cousin my nephew who's 11 now, and I think, you know, I would hate for him to have to experience anything similar to what I have gone through or what my family has gone through. And that really motivates me and drives me to keep doing the work that I'm doing.
Hi, I'm Owen Alderson. I'm from Belmont Community School. How hard was it to find work after leaving your country, and what do you do now?
So coming to the UK, I think people sometimes think it's very easy to kind of completely uproot and move to a new place, and no matter how beautiful and amazing that new place is, it's always incredible, because all the things that ground you in life, your family, all the things that act as anchor points, your job, your school, your family, your friends, they're gone, they're completely gone. So we were brought to the UK as part of this government program, but as part of that, we only had very short visa extensions. So the war was still going on in Bosnia, and it was incredibly difficult for my parents because they had the constant fear that we'd be sent back to Bosnia any time. And in Newcastle, there was about 300 Bosnians, and many of those have gone elsewhere, or during the 90s, they decided to leave the region out of fear that they would be sent back. So for my parents, it was incredibly difficult because they were stuck between these two worlds. You know, they want to make a contribution here, they want to integrate, they want to work hard, but they could be sent back any minute. So I think that hindered kind of my parents' opportunities in the 90s, because they always had that kind of the thought of, actually, we're going to go back, we're going to be sent back to a war zone, we're going to be sent back to our home that was completely destroyed. But for me, I was 9, and as I said, for me, it was the easiest. I think my brother and sister, especially my sister, it was a lot harder for them. But for myself, it was far easier, because as a 9-year-old, as a child, you quickly integrate, you start playing football, you make friends, and I enjoyed school. I was always good at school. So I went to Newcastle University. I studied architecture there. And after I graduated, I worked in Newcastle as an architect for several years. And then in 2015, I started teaching at Newcastle University. So I primarily teach architecture. But alongside that, I do research on the war in Bosnia and all this work around Bosnian genocide and the kind of the lessons that we can learn from Bosnia and apply here to the UK.
Hi, I'm Sophie Stevenson from Belmont Community School, and my question is, have you experienced any discrimination since arriving in Britain?
This question about discrimination is always an interesting one. I think in any modern society, or in any society in the world, there is always going to be times when someone will experience some form of discrimination. In all, I think my family has been incredibly lucky that we have had the support that we have had from the people in the Northeast. So one of the things that I didn't mention in my talk was when my dad was brought to the UK, as I said, I think I did actually mention this, he was promised that we would be reunited with him immediately. So that's why he said, okay, well, fine, I'll agree to coming here. And when that didn't happen, my dad and a few other men that were here, they went on hunger strike. And if it wasn't for the amazing people of the Northeast that got involved, I would still be in Bosnia. And I always reference, because I've still got this letter. So the MP of Newcastle at the time was Jim Cousins. So he got involved, and I've got letters that he wrote to the British government, the Croatian government, and the Bosnian government, where he describes, so there's a letter from April 1994, where he describes me, my brother, my sister, my dad, and my mom as constituents. I mean, if I'm being honest, in April of 1994, I was still in a war zone. I don't think I even knew where Newcastle was. And to have someone describe us as constituents, well, I mean, that's absolutely incredible. And then there was other people. There was this couple called Christina and John that lived close to where we were housed when we arrived in the 90s. So they they opened their home to us, and they held parties for the kids and dinners. And so, and that's just 2 examples. There were so many other positive examples of people helping us, and we had so much incredible support. That, you know, my teacher, as I mentioned, what she did, there was so many amazing, incredible things. And I always like to, you know, focus on those positive stories, especially when I'm talking about what happened in Bosnia.